There's always that voice of like, oh, Hadestown, Patrick Page, those are huge shoes. And I do it very, very differently, knowing what the fans expect and then doing something really different. It was scary. And I was just like, what if I'm not the one for this? What if this is like a terrible mistake?
In this episode, we're talking to Mr. Hades himself, Zachary James. Zachary has appeared in Broadway productions including The Addams Family, South Pacific, and Coram Boy.
And has originated roles in contemporary operas such as Akhenaten and The Black Cloak.
And I went backstage, I was weeping afterwards, and just everyone I saw in the hall, I was like, this is amazing. There were just so many moments in that show where the text coming out of my mouth was so just like, oh God, life. I do a little prayer every show, help us all to find each other and open our hearts and receive the hearts of the audience. If everyone is equal in the collaborative process, it's really can be quite magical to see what is assembled, between you. That can be really cool.
Hello and welcome to the 5 Minute Call, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the stories of the people that make theatre happen. In this episode, we're talking to Mr. Hades himself, Zachary James.
Zachary has had an incredible career spanning musical theatre, opera, TV and film.
Zachary has appeared in Broadway productions including The Addams Family, South Pacific, and Coram Boy.
And has originated roles in contemporary operas such as Akhenaten and The Black Cloak.
He was named Broadway World's Vocalist and Performer of the Decade and is currently starring as Hades in the West End's Hadestown. Thank you so much for being here. We're very excited to have this chat today. And so we always start by saying, or by asking rather, how you found your way into theatre. What's your inception story?
Oh, well, I actually just told this story this weekend because my theater teacher in high school is retiring after 30 years. So I made a little speech for him and sent it along for his celebration. But it was kind of a very roundabout way in that. So I grew up in Spring Hill, Florida, which is kind of middle of Central Florida, the woods, not a lot going on. And in school, they do musicals, right? And the boys never audition because it's not cool, at least at that time in the late 90s. And so the theater and chorus teacher was just standing around and asking every boy who walked by in the hallway to audition for the musical. And I said, oh, I don't sing. And he said, show up after school and sing Happy Birthday for me. So I thought about it and I was like, and I found myself, there singing Happy Birthday. And then I got cast as Roger in Grease. And I couldn't sing, I couldn't act, couldn't dance, didn't know what I was doing. But there was something about being on stage that just was very intoxicating. And it was the first time that I felt kind of not shy and insecure and like I wanted to hide. It was sort of like I got to hide behind a character, and people seemed to like it, and it was just a lot of fun. And so I thought, well, this is something I want to do, but I don't know how, and I'm very bad at it. So what do we do about that? So, but I did grow up in a musical family. My dad is a professional musician, and I was raised on classical piano. So I had a musical background, and I was used to performing on piano, like through the piano, which is much safer because it's not your own, heart and soul as much that you're revealing to a bunch of strangers. So there was a bit of the performance aspect that I was comfortable with as far as being on stage in front of people, but singing was terrifying, and I just couldn't really wrap my brain around how to sound, how I wanted to sound. My voice was in a very strange place, and I had no idea that I'd be becoming baritone, bass baritone, whatever, I identify as day to day. At that time, I was singing tenor in chorus, and I had a really nice falsetto, and I was using that. And it was just about to change, and the bottom was going to fall out from underneath me. And so it was really difficult vocally. Just, I didn't understand how to use my voice, and it was betraying me in front of people, cracking and all these things that, it was humiliating, but somehow I thought, I'll just keep going.
Which is incredible. There must have
been
I
guess so. Yeah.
Because at that age to be experiencing those moments of embarrassment and still go, yeah, this has still got something about it that I
Yeah,
want to pursue.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, it is kind of like, why didn't I run away?
Yeah.
Screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I loved acting. I really
Right.
did. It was, and I became kind of a research nerd right away. I went on to do Christmas Carol a couple times in high school, and Once Upon a Mattress, Taming of the Shrew, a few other things. But I would always research everything. I'd go to the library and take out VHS tapes, which we used to watch in the late 90s, of everything on the topic of the show we were doing, every version of A Christmas Carol. And I was always just looking for clues on how to bring things to life and make interesting characters. And I was always going and shopping for my own costumes at vintage stores and such, and I really enjoyed it.
I really love that. I think there's something inherently creative about you that it seems like it formed very early on, which is really nice.
Yeah, that would be a lifelong thing, probably. Yeah, the creativity. There was always some weird thing. I was always making things, and music was always there. And and I say I started theater late because as I just told you, I think I was a sophomore in high school when I first did theater, but I was always making characters and wearing costumes and putting on makeup in private, and as a young child, or taking my brother out in the backyard and having him shoot me with a water gun over and over again so I could practice dying, things like that. So there was something there. And I remember saying, I think I was 5, and I said I want to be an actor, and moved to New York, where I had never been, and I didn't really know where that idea came from. And but someone asked me, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I'm going to be an actor, and moved to New York. And they said, well, don't do that. That's really unrealistic. And, and I kind of have
way to squash a
I know.
5-year-old's dreams. God.
it was good for me though, because I kind of have a history of people saying, no, don't do that. And then I do it,
Okay.
So that's, yeah.
You like playing against the grain.
I do.
Yeah.
If you tell me I can't do something, I'm like,
Yeah.
I must do it.
Yeah, I have a kid like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever used your water gun dyeing acting skills?
Yes. I've actually very recently, I was just doing a film last week. I got shot to death. And the week prior, another film where I got shot to death. So yeah, there you go.
There you go. It came in very useful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and actually, I love dying. It's one of my favorite things, and figuring out the choreography to safely die and make it look, beautiful. It's a lot of fun.
That is, I'm not sure I've ever heard that perspective of it before. I actually think that's quite special, because I don't know that many people would ever consider it in that way. It's just sort of okay, fall over.
Yeah.
Well, it's you really have to sell it.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
audience really has to kind of like gasp and think and get lost in that suspension. So the hardest death I've ever done was actually in Billy Budd, the Benjamin Britten opera, and I was playing John Claggart, and he gets punched in the head and suddenly dies, and it can be quite comical.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
seems
It's a bit
unrealistic.
slapstick.
I'm
Yeah.
enormous, and this young guy much shorter than me is punching me in the head, and I'm supposed to die. So it was so fun to figure out how to make that realistic and kind of like get the research behind it of like what would cause this phenomenon, and then breaking it down choreographically. And I remember it was in my housing for the gig, and I was just rehearsing this death like over and over again all night and figuring it out. And I brought it back in the next day to show them, and they were like, oh, that's it. So and then every time the audience would like gasp, and it was fabulous.
That's the reaction you're looking for.
Yeah.
I love that.
So you mentioned in passing that you were in other parts of your life trying not to be seen.
Oh
or
yeah,
being-
for sure. Yeah.
Does that stay with you?
Well,
Or do you just come out of yourself?
it's something that is always there, that shyness, timidness, not wanting to take up too much space, things like that. I think that come with being a larger person also.
Yeah.
And I was always so much taller than everyone else as a kid, and everyone was always commenting on it. So yeah, I didn't want to be seen. I was like, can we talk about anything else but my height? And there were a million nicknames for me at school. And so yeah, it was not fun. I think I was really in my late 20s before I really like stepped into this body and was like, this is what we have to work with. Like, it's time to own it and just walk forward with this. And, through a lot of work and a lot of work with great people, voice teachers and body work professionals. But yeah, there was something, that felt really icky about being, hearing people talk about my body all the time as a kid. Yeah. And beyond that, I was just a very sensitive, shy little boy playing classical piano and everyone else was playing soccer, and I was, doing piano competitions and all these things that no one else was doing. And it was, I was aware that I was very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you get singing lessons?
Not until college.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in high school, no. And I first went to college, I was going to be a band director, and I went for percussion, music education, and I lasted one semester, and then I switched my major to theater with a piano minor, and then I ended up transferring out of that school to another school, and I got my bachelor's in musical theater eventually. Yeah. But it was not until school, post high school. I think I was 20 when I had my first voice lesson.
Yeah.
And the teacher said, well, you're never going to be an opera singer, but let's train classically a little bit so you can learn some fundamentals. And of course, she said, you'll never do this. So then I had to do it.
Yeah. I saw that coming a mile.
Yeah. But when I transferred, I was at Florida State University, and then I transferred to Ithaca College in upstate New York. And that's where I found my voice teacher, who has been my voice teacher for 22 years now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we've been together a very long time. And I would not do what I do without her and her wisdom, guidance, support. She's also a Feldenkrais practitioner, so the body work we've incorporated in all of our training together really, is life-changing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you go through other teachers first and then find her?
When I graduated, I moved to New York City, and I tried like every teacher that everyone was like, you have to study with this person, blah, blah, blah. And I wasted all my money and then went back to my teacher. And she said, come visit for a week. Let's undo all the damage and we'll get you back on track.
Yeah.
Do you know, I don't think that's a waste of money, though, actually. I think
No,
that's
it's not.
such a valuable learning
Yeah.
experience. And I would encourage my students to don't stick with me. Go and explore other perspectives, because you might find something that works better for you. You might realize that actually you like what I do. And I think that's a really important self-discovery moment, which it seems like you had as well.
For sure. Yeah, it was really important. And I think the greatest message I got from every teacher I went to in New York was they didn't understand my voice and didn't know what I was and my range and all of these different colors that I was capable of producing. And they were really trying to, find my box to put me in, like, you are a lyric baritone, a bass baritone, a bass, whatever. And they couldn't. And, of course, because I was 23, it's like a low voice doesn't mature until mid-30s,
Sure.
So no one knew what to do with me. And that was good. And I think musical theater and auditioning for musical theater, where a lot of times they don't care what you call yourself, they care what you look like and can you phonate this role.
Yes.
It helped me to break out of that box that people were trying to put me in the classical world. So
I was going to say, how do you manage that jumping between musical theatre and opera?
I love it. I love it so much. I mean, I kind of think of it as all the same thing. It's just storytelling, music, and this is controversial, but I believe acting is important in opera. And I know.
Where do you get these crazy notions?
But yeah, I kind of do the same thing everywhere. And I really enjoy that. And I also do a lot of contemporary opera, which is a little more similar to musical theater than Verdi and Mozart and such. But I think a lot of the same rules apply everywhere, and I like to push those boundaries.
Yeah, I really gosh, I'm resonating with a lot of your story, having classical background training and then also wanting to be in musical theatre. And I remember a conversation with my teacher about, it seemed to me that there was a huge push from everybody to go, which one are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to do classical or you're going to do musical theatre? And I couldn't make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to him and he was like, I have to.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. He said, my career's going from one to the other. He said, it kind of goes in 5-year waves.
Mm-hmm.
And but we have to make sure that your larynx can get round
Right.
all of it.
Right.
And if you can put the two of those together and understand the differences in the styles, why
Right.
could the one instrument not do
So
both
many
things?
things.
Yeah.
Limitless.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Flexibility.
Yeah. But I do think that confuses people a bit.
It does.
Did you find that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people were very confused. But,
Yeah.
I think we try to define things to understand them. And as humans, it's just what we do. And I understand why it was happening so much. But, yeah, I appreciate this time we're in now where it is more acceptable to cross genre and even celebrated.
Yeah.
My first agent in New York said, you have to take all this opera off your resume. No one's going to understand. And it was like then Baz Luhrmann was doing La Boheme on Broadway.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
y'all are not thinking big.
Yeah. This episode is sponsored by Vocality, a specially formulated blend of tea for professional voice users. Each ingredient has been carefully selected to help you soothe and take care of your voice. The tea is naturally caffeine-free, suitable for vegans, and does not contain any artificial flavours or colours. Vocality is the secret to vocal clarity in a cup. So, you come out of college, and what happens first?
Well, I briefly went to University of Tennessee pursuing a master's in opera performance. I left and moved to New York, and because I got this musical theater training. I didn't have classical opera training. It was just my voice kind of worked in that direction, and people were starting to pick me up for operatic opportunities. And so I thought, well, I should really pursue this. This seems cool, and the research nerd part of me loved learning about all the composers and the styles and there's just so much to learn.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I just really wasn't happy there because there was no focus on acting and movement and dance and all these things that I loved so much that were really the foundation of what I do on stage. The goal being to not think about singing when you're on stage and just ride the wave. And I was finding that wasn't really happening in this opera training. So I moved to New York, and I was in New York I had 4 different side hustle jobs trying to just, survive. And a friend of mine who was actually in Tennessee, who I was studying with there, he had been in Broadway show with this team, and they called him and said, hey, do you want to come be in this show? We need a bass. And he said, no, I've moved on with my life. But he called me and said, hey, you should audition for these people. So I banged down the door and was told no several times, but finally got in the room, and I got my first Broadway show 6 months after moving to New York, which was really cool. Yeah, it was a show called Coram Boy, which premiered here at the National and was a hit, and we ran for 3 weeks in New York and shut down.
Oh, no.
It didn't go well.
Oh, no. Why?
No one came.
Okay, that'll
Yeah.
do it. That'll do it. Yeah.
That'll really do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too obscure a story, do you
I
think?
think yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the title had no impact. No one knew what it meant. And,
Yeah.
we were at one of the Imperial Theater on Broadway, which is one of the biggest. It's where Les Mis, premiered in New York. And it's why are we doing this weird play in this enormous theater? But but it was a beautiful production. It was stunning, and I also got to watch some of the best actors I've ever seen in my life work every day, and that was invaluable training.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see this a lot actually of people that are just starting their careers, and everybody has said that the first production that they've done where they're working with actors that they admire, it is literally just absorb everything, which is, it's what you can't teach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. and seeing how people do 8 shows a week and kind of shift in their performance constantly to keep it alive, and they're always listening harder, and that was really, really cool to witness. Just think like, oh, this is how pros do it, you know. They're not just replicating the same performance every day and slowly drifting away from their soul, you know, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
But they're like digging deeper.
Yeah. Finding more.
Yeah.
How was it to close after 3 weeks?
Devastating. Yeah, it was devastating. And, you know, because I was like, wow, I've made it. I got a Broadway show my first year here. But the really cool thing that happened, though, was I got my Actors Equity membership from that show. Because if you're on Broadway, you have to be an Actors Equity. And once you have that, you have to be seen, if you want to be, for every Broadway show, right? So it's like an open door to audition for Broadway shows whenever they're holding auditions, which they have to publish those audition notices. So I just went to every audition I could, and then I got my second show, South Pacific, from an open call audition because I had that equity membership. So,
amazing.
And my third show came from the second show. You know, it's the same casting director. So it's really cool.
And were you still doing pieces of opera amongst these, or?
I was doing the occasional reading and workshop. Composers in New York always doing workshops and readings, developmental labs of their new pieces. But also on the side, because I did get a little bored doing 8 shows a week into my second year of South Pacific, because I just had the 8-bar Nothing Like a Dame solo, the little one. I was like, I need to do a little more than this. So I started producing my own works. I made kind of like a solo pastiche opera, assembled from many different composers' things. It told a story, and I had like shadow puppets and all this weird stuff. It was it was a lot. And and I found this warehouse theater in Hell's Kitchen that for some reason was just like dirt cheap rent. It was like the last remaining, venue in New York that was like the New York of the 80s, and like the Andy Warhol New York that you dream of as a kid. You're like, I'm going to go there and make cool things. So I found this little venue, and I produced a lot there. It started with my own stuff, and then I would call a composer friend and some singer friends and be like, let's make an opera about, whatever. I found this cool script. Let's turn it into an opera. And we were doing these really, really weird things in this warehouse. And there were rats and pigeons in the space with us. And there was a guy who worked there but also slept there. It was wild, but like some of my favorite memories.
I was going to say, it sounds absolutely fantastic.
It was fabulous. Yeah. And we're all still friends too. And we all talk about it all the time. Like, remember when we were doing that cool stuff? And like, now everyone is trying to do that cool stuff.
Yeah. But maybe it's that much harder to do that cool stuff now, do you think?
Well, yeah, it is harder. I mean, we were doing it with no money, right?
Yeah.
And now it's like every company is like, we want to do this great, wonderful new opera. We only need to raise $20 million.
Right.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I find money becomes a unnecessary obstacle in art making often, right? And so, some of my favorite experiences are things I've made with no budget at all. Yeah, it's just about the people and the right people showing up and being there for the passion of it.
Yeah. I think that's really important, isn't
it?
Yeah. I remember this atrocious short film that I made on no budget, like literally no budget. I had to beg this actor to come and work on it with us, and it is currently still sat on an old VHS tape, half edited, because I looked at it and I was like, I can't put this anywhere because it's absolutely trash. But I am still friends with all of the people that we worked on, and it's just you build those relationships.
I think you should pull it back out.
Yeah.
For sure.
Where am I even going to get a VHS player?
There's technology out there, but you might find a great film in the edit.
It was oh, you don't want to know what it's about.
I mean, we absolutely
definitely
do now.
Yeah.
It was a really awful Star Wars parody. But we had these lightsabers, and I painted one of these lightsabers because it was just like this awful color, and we painted it green so that we could green screen behind it and make it glow a little bit. And I mean, like, we were really in the editing at this point. But it was one of those cheap toys, so that every time you swung it, it just bent, and it just ended up becoming
Nice.
a whip.
Yeah.
I think that was awful.
Everyone wants to see that, though. Yeah, that needs to be
Right.
available.
Yeah.
I'll
That's gotta be
find
a bonus
it.
clip
Yeah.
for the
I'll
podcast.
edit it.
Yeah.
Sounds
Maybe
great.
we'll
it
cut
up.
it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was any of your early works filmed? Because that people would definitely want to see.
I don't know. It was like right when everyone was starting to get smartphones, so we didn't really have, that easy documentation. I remember we had to be like, we have to find a videographer so we can capture this. And it was like, now you don't necessarily have to do that if you just want to archival, But I'm sure there's something out there that's embarrassing and awful,
We're going to need it.
Find it.
Yeah. Shadow puppets. That
sounds quite
Great.
cool.
It was
like
cool. It was cool. But I remember I did that piece one time at Birdland Jazz Club in New York, which is like an incredibly famous jazz venue. And after the venue producer was like, well, we've definitely never had shadow puppets. Like, good.
But that sounds so reminiscent of you as a boy going out and sourcing all your own costumes and doing the
Yeah.
research and everything. It sounds like that was a drive that
Yeah,
stayed with you.
for sure. Yeah, it's what wakes me up in the morning. It's like, ooh, let's make something. Yeah, I'm making a potentially atrocious film right now myself. So, yeah,
About Star Wars?
Tell us more.
it's not about Star Wars. It's
Okay.
I've always wanted to do a thriller and like a noir-esque type thing.
Yeah.
So I've just been obsessed with this thing I'm making that I've said will be a feature-length film.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you manage that around performing 8 shows a week?
Honestly, it's the stuff I do on the side that kind of keeps me going. I've learned I need to have a lot going on to not get bored, Yeah. Yeah.
Does it ever get too much?
It used to. In my 20s, yes. I didn't know how to balance it, but I took a break. I put all the producing and all of that aside for a little bit. And that was good, and it took a few years, and then I thought, ooh, I'm really itching to do that again. But I looked back on my experiences and thought, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what support do you need, and learning you can't do everything yourself.
Yeah.
And learning, I think one of the most valuable lessons is learning that in collaboration, oftentimes you don't have the best idea. And if the forum is open, the best idea rises to the surface, and you never know who in the room has the best idea. So if everyone is equal in the collaborative process, it's really can be quite magical to see what is assembled in, between you. That can be really cool because something is born from a collective brain that otherwise would never be.
I really love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It takes a
that's
lot of
really
trust,
nice.
though.
Yeah.
Because there is a lack of, well, obviously there's a lack of control with that. So you don't know where the morning's going to take you.
It's
or
true.
The day's going
It's
to take
true.
you. But
I mean, I have to say, so I've worked with Phelan McDermott a lot, the director. We've done a lot of Philip Glass works together. We did a Broadway show together. We've been working together since, I want to say like 2009. And he has been such a mentor for me in watching his process and how he surrenders control. And I remember one of the first moments a actor came up to him and was like, what do I do in this moment? And he was like, well, how would I know? And he would say like, I'm the director. I am here and keep time and provide space for all of us to create.
it's incredibly refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, yeah, that's so obvious. Why aren't we doing that everywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find that is happening elsewhere? Or?
Occasionally, yeah, it's hard. I mean, that was a big struggle of mine in trying to dip into traditional opera, which my agent eventually was like, you know, you're doing a lot of contemporary opera. We got to do Wagner, Verdi, Mozart, everything else to, you know, let people know you do that too. And I was like, okay, sure. And then I found myself in these places where it was like, stand here, and on this word, raise your right arm and look this way. And I was like, I am going to combust. Like, I need freedom, and I need to have trust also. And I also need to explore in my process in rehearsal. And a lot of times it means like finding out what I won't be doing, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Experiment, fall on your face, go, whoa,
Yeah.
that one doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, even in Hadestown, there was a day where we were in this moment, and they were like, yeah, you really just face out to the audience the whole time here. And I was like, totally cool. I need a few days to like know what's going on behind me. So I'm going to face upstage, because once we're on stage, I'll never see these people again. And I need to know what's happening up here. What's everyone feeling?
Yeah.
So I just want to like look at people in the eye and connect with them and understand this moment better. And having that freedom really helped. And now I know what's happening up there, because it's weird. You get on stage and it's like, wow, there's going to be things I'll never see again or have never seen in rehearsal. And that's that, you know.
I'm always surprised by what a long period of time can go between a performer being able to have a show watch and just be able to step out. And now, obviously, they're needed on stage, but to have that perspective on it, to be able to stand back and go, oh, this is our show.
Wow.
This, not just my show, but this is our show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah. You know,
very valuable.
When I was doing South Pacific on Broadway, I put in my notice and I was going to leave. And then they offered me a show watch, which was very smart. I watched, and I went backstage. I was weeping afterwards, and just everyone I saw in the hall, I was like, this is amazing. You know? And I rescinded my notice immediately. I was like, this is so special. I'm not leaving. I can't.
Wow, that was some really good management.
Yeah.
Yeah. Big tick to whoever that was. Yeah, incredible. How long were you at South Pacific?
I was there for, I think, a year and 7 months or so, year and a half, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be a limited run. We were supposed to run for 3 months, and then it just was such a success. It won 8 Tonys, and it ran for like 4 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How's that coming off of a 3-week
Oh,
run?
it was phenomenal. It was, I've to this day, I've not been a part of something that was so celebrated. And people said at that time, like, this is really rare. A lot of people never have this experience. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. You know, I'm 26, you know. But it's true. Yeah, it's true. I've never been in anything that was that celebrated since. Yeah. And it's rare. For a lot of people, it doesn't happen, you know. Yeah.
It's hard to have any perspective on what you're experiencing
Truly.
in your 20s.
Yeah.
Like,
Truly.
you have nothing to measure anything against, and every experience is something new.
Yep.
And
Yep. But you look back and you're like, wow, that was
pretty
wild.
cool.
Yeah. And still, you know, doing that, looking back on last year, I'm like, oh, that was cool. I liked that, you know. And in the moment, you're like, oh, God, this thing I'm doing, this is horrible. I'm in whatever city that I don't want to be in. And then you look back and you're like, that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about travel, because you have literally been all over the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you find that?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, it's one of my favorite parts about the job is I love travel. And yeah, to see the world and do this has been such a gift. Like, where I'm from, you know, a lot of people don't leave, and like, my parents don't have passports, you know, and rarely leave Florida. And it's kind of very wild that I've done what I've done and been where I've been, coming from where I'm from.
Have they been to see you?
It's just about to ask.
Yeah, not out of the country, but yeah, they've been to New York. They've been to, you know, lots of places. Yeah, they don't travel a lot, but so they don't make everything like you know, which is hard sometimes, because I'm in shows with people whose parents come to every single thing, and it's just like, it's not because they don't want to be there. It's just like limitations. Yeah. So, but very supportive, and always have been. You know, my mom texts me still before, like, she rarely misses a performance, even with 8 a week. She texted me before and like, have a wonderful day today. You're a star. You know, I'm your biggest fan. It's like, thanks, Mom. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, from one mama to another. Well done, mama.
Yeah. She's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, bless. It's lovely. You seem very centered, very
Thanks.
comfortable in your own space, but that's very different to where we started this story.
Yeah, for sure.
When do you think that started to come together, and what do you think caused it?
Honestly, so late 20s, I got sober. And so I'm like almost 13 years sober now. And that's definitely an enormous part of finding myself and finding my center, finding my feet on the ground, and struggling with some tough stuff and working out, you know, all the trauma we build up over our lives and having to really face that and also take responsibility for my own actions and choices. And yeah, it's a huge part of my journey.
Can I ask what propelled you to make that change?
I was a wild kid in New York in my 20s and drinking too much. Yeah, it just was like way too much. And I think also within that, like it went from like having fun and being crazy and a wild time to like, I'm doing this because I don't like to feel. And there's like pain that I don't like to feel. So we're just like getting rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I went to therapy and talked to a lot of people. And I have a small group of friends, but we've all been friends for like 20 plus years now. So having people in your life that know you through many chapters has really been amazing for me. Just to let someone else know you in that way and to know them and kind of like have this reflection of yourselves against each other to see your growth and the full journey, you know, because you're meeting new people all the time. Every show, it's like, here's my new community. Hi, who do I want to be? How am I presenting myself? You know, and I try to be open and real and everything, but it's like, you really only get a surface level of who someone is when you're working with them for a month, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, you think you're going to be best friends for life and you never talk again, you know?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about that over the years, doing my own performing work, but then working with performers and being, you know, really intimately acquainted with somebody, especially doing the job I do. I've talked about this before. I'm, you know, in somebody's trailer and they're getting changed or whatever, you know, and then it would just disappear. And that is a very weird thing as a human. You're like, wait, we had a relationship going here. But actually, I've come to realise we did have a relationship going here. It's just very different to what you're describing with the long-term friends who see you through everything. It's just as valuable.
Yeah,
just a different
and it doesn't mean it wasn't special and it wasn't intimate. It's just like it was
for a moment.
Mini relationship.
Yeah. So were you doing stage work during this wild and crazy time?
Oh, yeah.
How did you manage that?
I don't know. You know, there's things you could do when you're younger that you can't do later. And I was also around a lot of people who were kind of in the same lifestyle. So it feels normal, you know, when you surround yourself with people who are doing the same thing as you, no matter how destructive it is. But yeah, I wasn't present. Yeah.
Did that make it hard to stop then?
You know, I'm grateful it wasn't hard to stop, actually, because I was so tired. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore, you know. And I, fell in with some people that picked me up off the ground, you know. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, it's honestly like, I look at everything I've done since then. I'm like, I wouldn't be doing any of this if I didn't make that change. Yeah.
I mean, Oren did some fabulous research, and you know, we were looking at your website and things, and one thing I had to comment on is Broadway World's vocalist and performer, not of the year, of the decade.
Listen,
that's quite a thing to be
cool.
given.
Yeah, it's cool. It was during the pandemic when everyone was at home. Broadway World decided, like, let's do an awards for like 2010 through 2020, and so it was pretty cool.
It's very cool, and it's also very cool for somebody who is stretching themselves across genres. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I'm at peace with not being in one genre now. I love hopping around and doing TV and film, doing musical theater, doing opera, whatever comes next. Yeah.
Do you find there are big differences between the different genres? Do you have to?
There can be. I mean, certainly on-camera stuff is quite different. Yeah. You really have to tailor your performance down to almost nothing, but sometimes. But also, I did an opera at the Met in New York where we're live streamed to movie theaters around the world, and so that's an on-camera acting gig suddenly in a 5,000 seat theater, right? So it's like I'm kind of thinking about both at the same time, like how do I reach that back row, but how do I also make sure that when my face is taking up an entire movie screen, I'm like active and alive in a way that's appropriate for that as well.
How did you find that?
Well, it's about behind the eyes always on camera. I think it's like having a lot of thoughts behind your eyes, having really clear, specific choices about environment, atmosphere, relationship, and knowing where you're going, but staying like ultra present and not, getting there up here before you're,
But those are really good mantras for theatre performance.
For
as
sure,
well, right?
for sure. Yeah, that's what we strive for. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but yeah, it's in theater. There are little places to hide occasionally. It's like, I turn up stage. This is when I cough, Yeah,
Right.
stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
You're like, this is when I shut down for 5 seconds to reset my equilibrium.
Yeah.
And it's nice. It's like, like in Hadestown, I run to my dressing room. My first break I get is like 3 minutes, and I go to my dressing room, which is mad. There's no reason to go. I'm just like, okay.
And
then I go
back.
back.
And then back again.
Yeah, because it's just like a safe, lovely place of just me, no spotlights, no 1,000 people. You know? And I need that. Yeah.
I think it's really important to take those moments.
Yeah.
For the survival of not just yourself, but the role and taking that time out to just. It's intense out there.
It is relentless. And interval, I always lay down on the floor in my dressing room for half hour. Always very set in my routine. And I go to yoga almost every day, which is life-changing and a recent discovery. It's my new favorite thing. It really keeps me together. So
Do you find that's good with your voice?
Yeah, really good. It's just the awareness of your whole body, I'm very much like a full body singer. It's like I need to know that this entire thing is activated, not just yeah.
We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, but I just wanted to quickly say that 75% of you are not subscribed to this channel. So if you could, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ding the bell for notifications so you never miss an episode in the future. You did, I'm going to completely butcher Akhenaten. Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, yeah.
Let's talk about this for a second, because that was fully spoken word, right?
Yeah.
But in watching it, it still felt, and again, this might come back to you, performing from the entire body. It still felt as if you were singing, but you were speaking.
Yeah.
I want to know everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. I worked with my voice teacher on that. I've been doing that production for 8 years now, off and on, and we've gone through every word of that in many ways. But so the first time I did it was here at English National Opera in 2016. I got the call to do it a week before they were starting rehearsal, and it's 6,000 words, and of course in opera you're supposed to show it memorized and everything. And I had actually very little experience speaking on stage. It was like Gilbert and Sullivan was the most speaking I had done, and so I was a little freaked out. And so that first time we did it was just like survive and get it on its feet. And I didn't know I was going to do it again. But then 6 months later, I was at LA Opera. Then we were at the Met twice, back to English National Opera 2 times. We're doing it next year and the year after in other cities. So it's been really cool to have this piece that over time I get to grow and develop and track my own progress in my vocal production, because it is quite operatic in the production, and it is full body, and it's like you cannot be up here at all or you're gonna die. You know, like just you're done. Because you have to fill 5,000 seat theater with over a huge orchestra, and sometimes it's like there's 14 trombones right now and like around the same frequency as my mid-range voice. Like, how am I going to cut? And then my teacher's like, wow, the singer's 4 minutes. There's and I'm like, okay, but like,
but how?
So yeah, but it's been amazing. It's been absolutely amazing, that production. It's my favorite thing I've ever done. It's the most I've learned about myself. It's the most responsibility I've ever been given on stage. Out there for like 2 hours and 45 minutes out of the 3 hours that it is. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and by the end you really have given everything. You're like, I have nothing left.
Yes.
I'm a carcass, yeah because the physicality of it is it's a Phelan McDermott production, and the movement vocabulary of it is all based in Michael Chekhov movement techniques. So floating, flying, molding, radiating. And so molding is like this slow movement resisting through space, and that's what we do for 3 hours. And your body's just like, I'm done now.
It is a spectacular thing to watch.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact scene, but there was a part where you were center and you had people around you and you were on the floor
juggling.
And your hand movements was, it was incredible. But how do you find that restrictive freedom, I'm going to call it, because I guess it's prescribed. You have to do it in that way. Do you not have to do it in that way?
No.
You're free with it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine.
I'm free with it and always have been, but it was all like born out of improv exercises, so I kind of made it myself.
That's really cool.
And yeah.
That's really cool. I thought it would be much more prescribed, as you were saying earlier.
Nothing at all. Yeah.
How's that then?
Amazing.
Yeah,
it's amazing. I mean, that being said, I was in the first production, right? So like I was in all those exercises and built the show.
Yeah.
Now when we do it with new casts, it is prescribed to them, right? And I watch, and then I go and I'm like, hey, so this was actually improv, so like you're allowed to do, and, and then we find relationship. And, it's really fun. But yeah, that's what it is working with Phelan. It's like, do whatever, see what happens, And sometimes he wants you to do things that are so blatantly, obviously, like not what you're going to do,
Right.
like doing a monologue from that show and like being, laughing, being joyful the whole time, but your son has just died. But it's like, then you find things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really important as well.
Yeah.
The more we explore, the more we find out. And I guess, a lot of young people might go, well, that's not how it should be.
Right.
But that's sort of the point.
That's the point. Yep.
Because you only find how it should be once you've explored what it shouldn't be or couldn't be.
Yep.
So yeah, it's really cool that you get to play with that.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Yeah. And he uses emotion cards also. So you'll be in rehearsal and out of nowhere, he comes up with those emotion cards and he's just like flying through them and you're going through 30 different emotions in 1 minute. It's fun. It's
I'm in
really
love.
Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, honestly, he's really amazing. Changed my life. Yeah.
And has that come through into other shows that you do now? Do you bring some
I
of
use
that
it
with
all
you?
the time. Yeah, all the time. Especially in those moments where you just don't know what to do, or there hasn't been time to address it with the director, or maybe you've been left to your own devices. I recall all those tools. They're just part of my process now. I use it in auditions. I use it everywhere. Yeah.
You mentioned auditions.
Yeah.
Jump on that.
Sure.
Tell us how you get through auditions.
I like them. Yeah, I really do.
You're
I actually
not the first person to say that.
Yeah, I
actually.
know.
Yeah.
in a way, I miss the in-person audition hustle
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, but I also really like self-tapes because I learn a lot from watching myself. And if I do, 10 different takes and I'm like, oh, you do the same thing in this moment, you have this habit, whatever, then you address it, and you have to, and I wasn't doing any of that work before the pandemic and how we self-tape all the time now. So I do really enjoy it. I especially enjoy doing TV, film, self-tape auditions. It feels right because you're, doing an on-camera audition for an on-camera gig.
The right medium.
Yeah. Singing, it's a little tricky sometimes on your iPhone, in the right environment. And sometimes they send a track and you have like one ear pod in and you're like trying to, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I do really like auditioning. I like going into the room with a creative team and meeting them. And I love, working and
was that always
feedback.
The case?
Yeah. I loved it. Always felt like, oh, this is my little show, and you're my captive audience. Yeah. You get to decide when it's over, but like I'm here, and
that's a nice perspective.
There's a gorgeous perspective. Yeah.
It's fun, but it's like almost you're in control of a lot in that moment. A lot of times you're deciding what to sing, what to wear, how you're retooling your resume to be specific to the job. There's a lot in it that is a fun little game. Yeah.
I think it is actually really nice to sort of play with it and gamify it in that way, because it's a little bit different for when you're going for a job, but especially like drama school auditions, it does feel very much like you are being auditioned, but it should be a two-way thing. Like you've got to now work with these people.
Exactly.
And if you don't feel like you can work with those people, then you're going to have a terrible time in your course, in your job or whatever. So playing with it like that, I think is really, really nice, because it just lightens it enough that the stakes are, I don't want to say the stakes are lowered so much, but it just reframes it, which is, I think, a really nice perspective.
Oh yeah. Yeah, whatever audition heartbreaks I've had were something I really wanted and I didn't get. If I'm really honest with myself and I look back on the audition experience and I think about the people in the room and how it was to receive their energy and how we worked together, I'm like, no, it wasn't a fit.
Right.
Like you didn't want to work with them. They didn't want to work with you. Move on.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Yeah. But you have to be honest with yourself, and that's hard sometimes when you want to wallow in the self-pity of like, but I wanted that role.
It was mine.
But it wasn't, it wasn't for you. Yeah.
Have you had long periods between gigs?
Not really, just the pandemic, Yeah, and even then I stayed quite busy. But yeah, I've been quite fortunate. I've been kind of like hustling.
Where were you for the pandemic?
A lot of the time was spent in Philadelphia, and I set up a little makeshift studio, and I was doing a lot of recording and filming, and I was actually called on by the opera industry on several occasions to make content, because we all became content creators. And I guess they enjoyed my content, so it was suddenly like, will you make us a video about this? Will you host this online gala, will you, whatever. And I started doing all of that stuff all the time, which was interesting. Direct acknowledgement from this industry that didn't know what to do with me, that I'm good at being on camera and like being charismatic and holding space.
Yeah, so a little moment of, see, you didn't know what to do with me, but I'm useful now, right?
Here I am.
Yeah.
emceeing your gala for the company I've never worked for.
Yeah,
but amazing, great. Yeah, and I had a weekly talk show out of Dallas Opera. They created a streaming network, and suddenly I had like this talk show every Friday that, it's really for like a year and a half. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I did stuff for Chicago Opera Theater, Opera America, like everybody was just like, hey, do this and this and this. So yeah, it was good though. It helped me pay my rent during that time. Yeah, which I didn't know how to do otherwise at that moment. It was tough.
Yeah.
And what did you come out of the pandemic to do? What was your first stage moment?
Oh God, it was, I got to play Don Quixote in Men of La Mancha.
Yes.
Yeah.
I freaking loved it. I have a sweet spot for this piece, and I watched, I think it was the 21 minute
oh God
thing that you had on, it's on your website.
Yeah. But that's a long watch.
Stunning.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
is. Yeah.
It was so much fun.
It looked fun.
Yeah, and it was in a giant amphitheater out under the stars, and you could hear frogs and crickets, and there were just so many moments in that show where the text coming out of my mouth was so just like, oh God, life and what we've been through, and being in front of an audience for the first time, and I was just weeping, all the time, and it felt so good. And it was also a moment where I was playing a good guy, which rarely happens, so it was really nice, and it was kind of this thing where I was like, wow, this is the closest I've ever felt to a character. Like, this guy is me. And there was this Cervantes quote I found. He was saying, like, he and Don Quixote were one and the same. There was no difference between them. They live in each other. And I was like, yeah. Then I had a spooky dream where Cervantes came to me. That was weird. Yeah.
Wow. What did he say?
Well, I was really freaking out about the role, and it had been 2 years since I'd been on stage and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm going to be terrible. Maybe I can't sing anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm in my bed in the housing, and, he appears at the end of my bed, and he's laughing. And he's like, out of everyone in the world, I've chosen you. I was like, okay, Cervantes, yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, and I called my voice teacher in the morning, and she was like, so are you gonna, accept that you're doing this now and go for it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it was weird.
That's
It was really weird.
Fantastic dream. That's your brain properly taking you in hand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, hey there,
Yeah.
you have to do this.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Amazing. It's actually really refreshing to hear you say you had that moment of anxiety about it. Is that the only moment you've had in your career?
Always.
Yeah.
Every show, yeah.
Why?
Imposter syndrome. Every artist, right? It's
Interesting.
yeah. I think it's just like part of every artist's process, whether they talk about it or not. And then you have to figure out for yourself, like, is this sustainable or not? And how much of it is like self-abuse in my process? And when do I need to release this? But there's always that voice of like, Hadestown. Patrick Page, those are huge shoes, and I do it very, very differently. And the idea of knowing what the fans expect and then doing something really different, it was scary. And I was just like, what if I'm not the one for this? What if this is like a terrible mistake?
Yeah. Do you know what though? When I saw it, because obviously you go in with the expectations of what you know.
Yeah.
I think I remember messaging you straight after I saw it, being like, yeah, okay, this is everything that I want from this. But also your voice was just perfect.
Thank you.
I think,
Thank you.
But again, it comes back to, you play with it, you make it yours, you experiment.
Yeah.
And people will learn that you can't just carbon copy from one thing to the other.
Right.
And, this is theatre. It moves, it changes, and it has to. And what you have done with it tells the same story, but gives us new perspective on the character.
Right.
Which I think is really, really nice, because then you start to get these layers from all the different things that you've watched. And I just think it's special. That's what makes good theatre.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. It was the goal. I wanted him to be, to have some humanity.
Yeah.
I wanted people to root for him and not see him as a bad guy.
Which you do.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Like, you go in wanting to hate this character. You're like, why are you doing this?
I know.
and I walk out of it and I'm like, I love it.
Yeah. No, I feel it, because, the top of every show, all the characters are introduced and everyone cheers, and it gets to Hades and they're like,
this guy.
I'll win him over by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they hate me going into it. I've said this a few times, but I thought of him as like a wounded little boy who's been given the keys to a kingdom he doesn't want, and has all this power and responsibility. And people see him a certain way, so he just becomes that. He's like, fine, if you don't see me for who I really am, I'll just be what you think I am, which I think is fun.
You have an extraordinary presence.
Yes.
On stage.
Thank you.
I mean, like, you haven't opened your mouth yet, and we are interested, and we want to know. And also, you are. There's a magneticism to you standing there. Have you been aware of that a long time? Is
Um,
that crafted or?
I think I became aware of it as something that is an actual thing that can be spoken about. Kind of the way we say like the magic of theater, right? But what it really is we're transferring energy between the audience and the stage, and then our heartbeats sync, and then there's like actual science and math to it.
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
think presence is the same way. It's like you can turn it on, you can intensify it, you can turn up the volume, and then you know when to turn it down because it's someone else's turn, you know?
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm aware of and access. But I've also learned that even at times where I think I'm terrible and that I have no presence, I do still, it's still there, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like breathing, it's involuntary, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can be aware of your breath and use it to your advantage. But even if you're not, you're still breathing.
Do you think that was there in that very first show? Literally back at school?
Oh,
like,
God.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Gotta get those tapes out. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
No, you know, it was there when I was a child in piano recitals. Yeah. So I think it's always been there because people would speak about it, and it would also, I would notice like I would walk out to play and the room would suddenly quiet, whereas like it was, you know, not a focused room when other people would come out. I was like, this is different. What's happening here? Like,
Yeah.
am I a witch?
If so, what can I do?
But there's this one time, actually really profound moment in my early performing days on piano where I just went up and I was like, I have no idea. My fingers don't know what to do next. And there's nothing. And I was just like silent. And the whole room was silent. And like a long time went by, like over a minute, you know,
Wow.
and everyone was just silent. Nobody said anything. And then I just started over and I made it all the way through. But I would think I was like 9, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, playing Chopin. And I was like, but yeah, there's something about that where like no one came to rescue me. Everyone was just like
Yeah.
some
I
sort
wonder
of
if
weird
you
presence
just
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
gave off a
Yeah.
no, this is
like,
going to be okay.
Yeah.
Just sit with me because audiences get anxious.
They do,
Get-
especially when children are making mistakes.
What a great learning experience as well.
It was cool,
Yeah.
but it still haunts me where I'm like, you don't know your lines.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to mess up. How is it possible that you know all these? That's not, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, I question like, how is it possible? How does my brain know all of these things? And that they're going
Yeah,
to
you don't want to go down that road.
No,
That's-
no, no,
especially
no,
not 5
Oh,
minutes
it's
before
terrible.
a performance. No,
it's
that's
terrible.
not.
Yeah.
Not helpful.
Yeah.
Speaking of 5 minutes before a performance,
Yeah.
we are called the 5 minute call.
Yeah.
Can we ask you what you do at the 5 minute call?
I do a little prayer every show. You can call it a prayer or whatever. But I ask for trust in my body, my tongue, my hands, my feet. Help me to be of service to this show, to this audience, to this character, to my colleagues. Help us all to find each other and open our hearts and receive the hearts of the audience. And then I get a little witchy and I say, you know, spirits of this place, if you want to perform with me, you know, because like, you know, Laurence Olivier's been on that stage and just like, hey, everybody, ghosts of the theater, come along if you want. Yeah, but just that's more like acknowledging how sacred a space it is and how many people have been there. So yeah, that's my little routine. And if I do that, I'm like, good to
That
go.
is beautiful.
That is absolutely beautiful. We were just talking about theatre spaces. To me, they
Yes.
feel like cathedrals.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I'm not
Temples.
religious, but I also feel it in cathedrals and religious spaces. There is something about the fact that so many souls have been in that space.
Oh yeah, you can feel it.
And exchanged energy.
And you can feel it in the audience too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's some of my favorite moments in tech rehearsal. I go out in the audience when I can and I sit there and it's like, it's a wild feeling to be amongst these empty seats that have been filled for hundreds of years. And to know, you know, they'll be filled soon with strangers who you'll have a brief relationship with. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah. There's a lot going on in theaters.
Yeah.
Spooky.
Oh, it's magical.
Yeah.
It's magic. It's
Love
proper
it.
made the
Yeah.
hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, we don't really know anything about anything.
We do not.
Who's to say
We do not.
Laurence
indeed.
Olivier isn't wandering those halls?
Right?
Yeah.
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 I mean,
Sure.
Past, present, future.
Exactly.
Existing at once.
I was going to say,
yeah,
technically he was.
We know nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have one final little thing for you.
Yes.
So every episode we ask the previous guest to write a question for the next guest that goes completely unseen until this moment.
I love that.
If there were no boundaries with roles, what would be your dream role in what show and why?
That's tough because I always say like a new piece. Like my dream role is like a brand new thing, you know. But I might have to go with like Mama Rose and Gypsy. If we're going
Yeah,
there
nice.
with this question, yeah,
Yeah,
come on.
yes.
Like, is there a better role?
Nice.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I need to see that now.
Yeah.
yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it's a fabulous role and a fabulous show too. And reading the history behind those real life people is like mad. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah.
That we've put that out there now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Somebody
coming.
needs to make this happen.
I don't know. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Wow.
Thank you so
you.
much for sharing your story
Oh,
and
thank
your
you. It
time
was a
with us
pleasure.
today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This has
Real
been
pleasure.
so special. Genuinely, thank you for your time. It's
My pleasure.
amazing. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the 5-Minute Call. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ring the bell for notifications. Your support really helps us bring you more amazing stories.
If you are or have been affected by any of the topics discussed in today's episode, please see the show notes below for some helpful resources.